Welcome into Flag for Discussion, episode 22 for Monday, September 1st. My name is Farbod Merkazi. He is Jace Hatfield. Wow. Week one is done. I don't know if we could have done worse on our picks, but I promise you we're going to be trying to do better, but maybe it'll go bad again in the next 12 weeks or so. I think there's a lot to recap. There's a lot of games here. Jace, how did you take in week one? Where were you? Did you enjoy it?
Oh, it was fantastic. I'm in South Haven, Michigan with my family and my fiance's family. We brought a TV out on our deck. We were watching football all day. We started the day off at a bar downtown South Haven, made our way home, watched outside. It was like 70 degrees. Morning was like 55. We went on a walk, had the crisp fall air. It felt like waking up in the morning with the crisp, cold air, putting on a hoodie, walking around with a cup of coffee. It felt like college football, and it was true, and it was fantastic. We had a great time. We watched all the big primetime games basically, and of course we were watching the Duckies too, which not a whole lot to break down, and they looked fantastic.
Yes. Yeah, Oregon looked really good. Dante Moore looked as advertised. I wish I could have that crisp, cold fall air. It's like
Yeah,
90
I
degrees
want to
out
ask you
here
what
in
you did, but
California.
I feel bad. Also, how did you watch the games? Enlighten our viewers.
I had a 13-hour workday. It was a great workday. I appreciate the opportunity to work, but at the same time, I was able to take in all of the games from the comfy location of my work desk and work chair. But I watched almost every game, I think, because I was able. It was a pretty good setup. So I didn't get the crisp cold fall air. I got air conditioning inside. I also, when I stepped outside, it was like 90 degrees in Southern California. So there's no there's no crisp fall air for me to even find right now. But hopefully we'll get to that. It was quite a weekend, quite a week one. And by the way, week one's not done. South Carolina and Virginia Tech are playing as we speak, so you might see some live reaction from Jason and I if scores change, anything happens. And the Miami Notre Dame kickoff tonight. Tomorrow, when this episode comes out, technically today, I think North Carolina plays TCU. So there's a lot to get into. Week one is not done, but there's already so much to talk about. Before we get into it, as always, make sure you're following us everywhere. YouTube, Flag for Discussion, wherever you get your podcast, at Flag for Discussion. We're on TikTok at Flag4Discussion, on Twitter at F4Discussion. Jace, I want to give you the option. We got 3 different doors to go down, 3 different games. Do you want door 1, door 2, or door 3?
Let's start with door one. Let's see what door one has to offer.
All right, Florida State defeated my number 8 Alabama 31-17. I almost said Miami because I just talked about the Miami game. So let's restart that. Florida State defeats number 8 Alabama 31-17 at home. We all owe a major apology to Tommy Castellanos. I'm right there. I think everybody in the media has just spent the last week and the last, I don't know, 6 weeks ever since he started making comments about Alabama, about how they don't have Nick Saban to save them anymore, about how the Florida State defense is the best defense he'll play all year. We all thought, man, you're just giving them bulletin board material. You're just giving them reasons to come out with their hair on fire and destroy you. And by the way, I think Lee Corso, picking his alma mater, where he coached Florida State, was the only media member who picked Florida State to even cover in that game.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot to talk about with Alabama, and that's going to be a majority of this. I think the question for Florida State is this real? Is this sustainable? Are they suddenly an ACC contender, or was this a one-off game? Did they make a statement for you in this game?
I think they did. They didn't throw the ball particularly much or very well, and they still won by 2 touchdowns against maybe Alabama might have been a little overrated, but it's still Alabama. And, you have a good note here. According to 24/7, the second most talented roster in the country. So it's not like you maybe beat a fluky ranked team or like a Duke if they were in the back end of rankings. It's like a Alabama Crimson Tide, and you did it by overpowering them at the line of scrimmage. They dominated the trenches offensively and defensively. They ran the ball at will, which when we talk about Alabama, I have a lot to say about that. I think this is for real. Mike Norvell 2 years ago proved to us that he's a great coach. I think Florida State, we know that in terms of branding and all that, they have what it takes to bring in good players. And I was not a believer coming into week one, and a believer
No.
in the sense that they go 6-6, but not a believer in that this team's going to even compete for the ACC championship this year. I think I was wrong. And we'll talk about Clemson in a little bit, but Clemson didn't look all that. We'll see how Miami looks tomorrow night, or sorry, tonight, or I guess yesterday. Well, when you're watching this, you know how
when
Miami looks.
the
I
show's
don't
out,
quite
yeah.
yet. Throwing me for a loop here. So I do think Florida State proved to me at least that they're championship contenders, and I can say I will take them way more seriously the rest of the season than I did coming into week one. I thought that game was going to be not even close.
No, I think in our rundown last week, you wrote BTA for what Alabama was going to do to Florida State. So if that gives anyone an understanding of like how much of a shock this was, I mean, if just speaking on the Florida State standpoint, a couple years ago they went 13-0. Obviously, Jordan Travis injury kept them out of the playoff. They started a war with Kirk Herbstreit and the committee because they left them out of the last 14 playoff, and then. And then last year, 2-10. Mike Norvell has this building process where he clearly was building it the right way, but he does rely a lot on just transfer talent to come in. And 2 years ago, we saw the culmination of what happens when that transfer talent is identified well, the right talent, and gels as a team, and also develops into seniors with Jordan Travis and company. We saw how good they could become, and we saw how good Mike Norvell was as a head coach. And then, but we also saw it's funny because you normally see like gradual drops. We saw a complete 180 last year with Florida
Yeah.
State 2-10. Not there was just nothing inspiring about that Florida State team. So I guess it was for me. It was more of a confirmation that everyone who was down on Mike Norvell or said he should have been fired or was happy that he gave back some of his contract to Florida State after last year. I think people are way too prisoners of the moment. Yeah, he had a terrible year. You can't have a worse year than how Florida State looked last year. Even if you went 0-12, I don't think you would have had a worse year than Florida State's 2-10 last year. But I'm not saying they're going to go off and win the ACC or win the national title. But I think anyone who is down on Mike Norvell just doesn't understand how fluky college football can be. And look, they could go 1-11 for the rest of this year. But that one game with how much firepower they showed on offense with Gus Malzahn. By the way, Gus Malzahn is a whole other story. He beats Alabama again, and he tweeted out, felt like old times last night. And I thought that was amazing. Tony White, the defensive coordinator, he came in. That defense was on fire, and they were more physical. They were more active. They were stronger all around. So I think for me, like I said, it was more of a confirmation that Mike Norvell is a good coach. Last year was a bad plan.
I would agree. I would
So
agree with that. And I
yeah,
think on the flip side, Kalen DeBoer kind of looked like what Mike Norvell kind of was last year, almost. Not that Alabama. I shouldn't say this. I don't think Alabama's going to go down a 2-10 route, but it almost kind of felt like the flip, like opening weekend when I don't know. It felt like the flip to me. I felt like I was watching what I thought Alabama was going to be this year in Florida State, and I thought I was watching what I thought Florida State was going to be in Alabama this upcoming season, which is the opening Florida State had last year's opening Kalen DeBoer kind of put out this year. So yeah, I want to get to Alabama though because I think there's a lot of interesting conversation
yeah.
here, and I'm curious. Does this? We were both very high in Alabama, you especially. Does this change your trajectory for Alabama this year, or do you think this was not a fluke, but maybe just a learning curve and they'll get right back on track?
I tell you I don't know because
Yeah, I think that's a fair answer.
I don't love the fact that they were my SEC pick, SEC champion pick, but at the same time, I mean, okay, let's just look at the stats. First downs, Florida State beat Alabama in first downs. Third down efficiency, Florida State was better. Fourth downs, Florida State was better. Florida State had more total yards. Alabama had more passing yards, but that's because Florida State threw the ball 14 times. Florida State yards per pass 10.9, Alabama 5.9. Rushing yards, Florida State 236 to Alabama's 87. To me, that is not indicative of Alabama. And I don't care that Nick Saban's not there anymore. But you have the talent you have the physicality you have. I don't even know if it's a Kalen DeBoer problem because when he was at Washington, granted, yes, he was playing Pac-12 teams, but when he was at Washington, that team, especially in 2023, really killer defense, and with far worse quote unquote star ranking talent than this Alabama team has. So I was really dismayed by their physicality, their like attention to not detail, their like want to, their motor. It just felt like they were a click behind, and maybe that's because they replaced the offensive coordinator. Maybe that's because they have a new quarterback. I don't know what the reason is. I still believe Kalen DeBoer will figure it out because I still think Kalen DeBoer is a good coach. I think anyone who's saying that he's going to be fired or he should be fired doesn't understand that he has a $69 million buyout today and then 62 if they want to fire him at the end of the season. It was an embarrassing performance. I understand they only lost by 2 touchdowns. I understand their losses happen and teams will not go undefeated with the 12-team playoff after conference expansions that have happened. I understand all of that. But the manner in which they came out just looking dead in the water after their first drive, because their first drive was really good. They went down the field and they looked like they were going to blow Florida State out. And then all of a sudden some momentum was lost or the motor died or whatever. And it was like, we belong to be here. There was complacency. That was a lot to answer. But for me, that my opinion on Alabama hasn't changed in terms of them being a potential contender for the playoff or being a SEC champion contender. I just am right now. I'm embarrassed to have picked them.
Yeah, I think in Alabama's sake, if you're a fan, you're hopeful this is the kick in the butt sometimes that you need as a team. Ohio State losing to Michigan last year felt like the end of the world. That was the kick in the butt that team needed to go on and win a national championship. I think you hope that that's what this was. And we've said it so many times in this podcast, but it will always ring true. You didn't lose an SEC game. You're still 0-0 in your conference. You're still tied for the top. All is not lost. You lost to a solid Florida State team. And I think you have to look at it. You learned a lot about your team. You are the opposite of what Alabama, I think, is in our head, the Nick Saban Alabama. And shoot to Thomas Castellanos' credit, he was right that he doesn't have Nick Saban to save them. Nick Saban, when you think of Alabama, you think of dominating offensive lines, dominating defensive lines, running the ball down teams' throats with impossible run games to stop. You think about defense, right? Getting to the quarterback, getting in the backfield, stopping the run, forcing teams to make third and longs. They were the entire opposite of that. 236 rushing yards, averaging over 5 yards a carry for Florida State. That is really unlike Alabama to give that up. Florida State only threw the ball 14 times, and they put up, what do we say? It was 31 points. Also, Alabama, when you think of Nick Saban, you think of like not turning the ball over, not committing penalties, good special teams. Alabama, 8 penalties, missed a field goal, not a single punt inside the 20. I feel like with Alabama and Nick Saban, you just think of like punt blocks, great kicking teams, great punting, just so fundamentally sound. And it was just so unlike Alabama to see that. The thing that worries me for them long term is how bad their run defense looked. That's a critical, like if you can't beat Florida State, who's only throwing the ball 14 times, you got a tough SEC schedule coming of teams who can also run the football. But I do think things like penalties, things like missed kicks, some poor punting, that's stuff that can get cleaned up. And I think you could comfortably chalk up, hey, it's early in the year, we're young, we're growing. Those are growing pains, that happens. The run defense does concern me, and I think if Alabama is going to have a struggle this year, it's going to probably be along the lines of, hey, we gave up 5 yards of carry to Florida State, and we only average 3 yards a carry ourselves. That's going to have to switch. But everything else, it was worrisome, but I do think that will get cleaned up. And I'm with you. I still think Kalen DeBoer is a great coach. It doesn't, every good coach can lose a game like this, and it doesn't make you a bad coach because of it.
There's just so many people already, and starting last night, podcast, YouTube, TV, and going to today, and probably all week, especially once Feinbaum goes live on Monday. Like, so many people were saying, like, fire him. So many people were saying this is an inexcusable loss. I think it's pretty embarrassing. I think you go into this game against number 8 team in the country, unranked. Sure, they might not, looking back at it, they probably deserve to be ranked, but people kept saying like this is just there's no explanation to lose to this game. I can explain maybe in a little way. There's no excuses here, but there's a bit of a, what's it called, like a mental feeling that Alabama players had about Florida State. Like, we're already better than them. We don't have to show up at our apex like this is Georgia and win. And there's some complacency there. I also think we have to point out Jam Miller, their starting running back, and Tim Keenan, their starting defensive tackle, were out. I don't think those two were the difference in the game. Their absences were the difference in the game. Obviously, their run defense would be a little bit better with Tim Keenan in there, and their run game would have been a little better with Jam Miller in there. But I don't think we can discount that they weren't there, but also them not being there wasn't the reason. They showed up, had a good first drive, and were flat for the rest of the day. It felt to me that the game was too fast for Ty Simpson. I don't think he had a bad day.
Yeah.
I also don't think he had a good day. I just felt like he was moving a million miles an hour in his head, and it wasn't operating smoothly for him to just read the defense and go. I don't know. I think there's just a lot of overreactions. This is week one. This is Monday after week one. There's going to be a ton of overreactions. I don't think Alabama's out of the picture. I think this could have been a case of an underestimation of a good Florida State team. And Florida State, do you think they should be ranked next week?
Absolutely. You beat the number 8 Alabama team. Maybe Alabama shouldn't have been ranked. You beat the number 8 ranked Alabama team by 14 at home. I think you got to sneak in. I guess it also depends, who do you kick out? Maybe that's the tougher question. I need to go look at the top 25, because I do think they should, though. I think they look good enough.
And then, I mean, this is the talking point that's been going on about Kalen DeBoer since the loss. He has as many unranked losses as Nick Saban had in 17 years. And also, he has one more opener losses in 2 years than Nick Saban had in 17 years. Nick Saban never lost an opener. I think, one, you can't be comparing yourself to the GOAT. Like, whenever people compare quarterbacks to Tom Brady, what are we doing? But at the same time, there is reason for the Kalen DeBoer hate. It's just, I think you and I are on the same page of we expect him to fix it. Now, if they come out against UL Monroe next week and they look flat again and look entitled again, that's the word I was looking for, entitled earlier, then that's a conversation we should have. But for now, I'm not panicking about Alabama. I think this is just a good Florida State team. Anything else on that?
I think last point I'll make for Alabama looking forward, you have 2 get-right games now, both at home. You get UL Monroe, and then you get Wisconsin, which I think is a good. You start at the bottom of the barrel with UL Monroe. Get yourself right. Go out, kill them, run the ball well, stop the run, see if you can get Ty Simpson into a better flow. And then you take a little step up and you get Wisconsin. Not a team that I think is going to give Alabama any fits. Certainly, I don't think as good as Florida State. I do think better than UL Monroe. Okay, tune that up. Let's see us back-to-back weeks of good football. That will launch you into a bye week where then you do have to come out and play at Georgia. So I remember when we were doing our preview, we were talking about Alabama. We kind of talked about how these first 3 games for them are that launching pad into that Georgia game. And I kind of see, like, neither of us expected it to be a 2-1 launching pad. We thought it would be a 3-0 one. But, I think UL Monroe, you need to get Ty Simpson in a flow because at Georgia is going to be a whole nother animal that he struggled, like you said, he didn't look great against Florida State. It looked too fast for him. If Florida State's too fast for you, wait till you got to go play in Athens. That's going to be that's a whole nother level of football. So I think you got to get right if you're Ty Simpson. And I know we want to move on, but I do have a question I wanted to
No,
ask
you're
you, and I
good.
think this is a good point for it. If Ty Simpson struggles against UL Monroe, going to that Wisconsin game, do you quarterback change, or is that too late and you stick with them until the Georgia game?
I think you got to see what you got. I think the problem is they clearly believe in Ty more than the other guys. And maybe that, by the way, for everyone at home, Keelan Russell, Austin Mack are the other options. Keelan Russell is a 5-star true freshman. Austin Mack came over with DeBoer from Washington, former 4-star quarterback a couple years back. I think if those guys were ready, they wouldn't have basically announced that Ty Simpson was going to be their quarterback in July. Ryan Grubb didn't have any reason to say if the season started today back in July that Ty would be the quarterback. He didn't have any reason, but I think it might be, and maybe we'll notice this depending on Ty Simpson's performances going forward. It might be more of a case of Ty didn't take the job. Ty didn't win the job. The other guys didn't take it from him.
Yeah.
Look, I don't want to bash the kid off of one bad game. Everyone has a bad game. We'll have a bad show at some point. Not today, but the I don't think we can just jump into a new quarterback against Wisconsin, especially when you have Georgia coming up. Like you have to try to fix what's within the program first. And I don't think Ty Simpson was necessarily the problem yesterday. You have, like we kept saying, they have the number 2 best talent roster in the country. Most 4-star, 5-stars, number 2 in the country. So when we're talking about that, and when you consider that fact, I didn't have a chance to throw. Jeremy Bernard had a good game. Overall, some pieces alongside Alabama did. It's just the physicality and the motor for me. It's like the want to make a play on defensively, offensively. I don't know what the actual stat is, so forgive me, but here's another stat for you that I read this morning on Twitter. Kalen DeBoer is 6-0 against Dan Lanning, Kirby Smart, and Steve Sarkisian, and he's lost 4 unranked games outside of those as the head coach of Alabama. Make it make sense.
Is he a Michael Penix merchant, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, there's
People
a
are talking.
there's a chance that Michael Penix turned a good offensive coach into Alabama's head coach, but I don't think you and I are there to think that he's a merchant yet. Did you have thoughts on the Ty Simpson thing, or do you want to move on?
No, I agree with you. I think you give Ty Simpson 2 quarters against UL Monroe, give Austin Mack a quarter, give Keelan Russell a quarter, and then you take that, you reassess going to the Wisconsin game. But I do think you need to see what else you got. But I don't think he was a problem, so I'm not dying.
Next game, Ohio State. They beat Arch Manning's Texas Longhorns 14-7. Big noon kickoff was there. Game day was there. This was the big noon kickoff game. I don't even like most games. I think we should start with the winner. I don't think there was a winner in this game. I think everyone who's bashing Arch in general is only bashing because of his name. I think Julian Sain wasn't much better, and he's kind of just going under the radar. Obviously, he won the game, but his game was not that great either. So, did Ohio State win the game? Did Texas lose it? What's your biggest takeaways? And then we'll get into the Arch stuff. Obviously,
Yeah,
it's all combined.
yeah, I don't think either team impressed me. I didn't watch that game and think, oh man, my national championship is playing on this football field right now. I
Not even
Julian
defensively.
saying maybe defensively they looked on par. I think my fear, but neither team really ran the ball very well, and that again, that maybe that's just the defenses were that good. But like, I didn't think anyone on Ohio State looks like they had game-breaking speed or I got on the running back position. CJ Donaldson, good big running back, but he kind of just looked clunky. And I think that's what he had been at West Virginia. And that's kind of what he was at Ohio State and that one game with Ohio State. And that doesn't that doesn't scream Ohio State to me. I'm used to Ohio State running backs, Travion Henderson, just being a home run hitter every time he touches the football. Even like Quinshon Judkins is like a power back. I don't even know if he's so shifty and
He's a home
athletic that
run
he's just
hitter
good at
too.
everything. And Donaldson just looks very one dimensional to me. They didn't really seem to have a whole lot. Peoples looked okay. And then Julian Sayin, actually, I thought looked all right. He really uncharacteristically, and I have a feeling this will not happen again. Jeremiah Smith with 2 drops.
Two drops.
I don't think you'll. Yeah, I don't. And started the game. I think both of them were like in the first quarter, maybe even. I don't think you'll see that much. So I do think Julian Sayin looked decent. I thought he was making good reads. I didn't think he made any bad or dumb plays. And I thought he was hitting receivers, giving them chances to make plays, which when you have Carnell Tate, Jeremiah Smith, Max Clare, like that's what you do. I thought he looked like he understood what his job was and he did a good job. I have faith that Julian Sayin is going to grow into a really good quarterback this year. On the flip side with Texas on offense, I thought Arch looked in the same way what you were saying with Ty Simpson. The game looked quicker than it should have been for
Way too
Arch.
fast.
He didn't do a good job getting through his progressions. There's a few times where he was just staring down at Ryan Wingo, and despite it being double coverage, he just hucked one up. And he could have had 5 interceptions that game if Ohio State had made more plays in the ball. I didn't think he looked great, and I I've kind of been on the train with Arch Manning for a little while. I think his name has carried him more in terms of hype than his actual output and talent. Not that I don't think he was ever a good quarterback or a 5-star, but I thought maybe he was a 4-star quarterback in a 5-star name just because of the Manning situation. And I kind of even went from that to buying into the hype this offseason on Texas. And he looked way worse than I had expected. And I thought his inability to read, like go through progressions, his inability to, one thing I noticed, never sets his feet. He was always trying to throw off a
Yeah.
back foot from a weird angle when he didn't have to. Part of that is when you get so much pressure as a quarterback, you just start to create pressure that might not be there.
You
But he
speed
was
yourself
throwing
up.
from, yeah, he was just throwing. He would have drag routes wide open, and he's trying to throw it back foot, sidearm, and he would overthrow it, throw it behind. He was very inaccurate on open receivers. He was making bad decisions. But then at the end of the game, when I also part of it too, sometimes a quarterback like Arch, when you're so forced into these like throws, I'm sure there's a lot of coaching and game plan that goes into what was going on. Once he got into rhythm later in the game and they had to go down and score, and he was just kind of airing it out, and it was more, hey, Arch, go make plays. He looks a lot better, and that I think that's the Arch Manning that we expected the whole game, and we got for a drive and a half. So I do think there's hope for Arch Manning. I think if I'm Texas, I am a little nervous. They don't really have another option outside of him right now. So if Arch takes a while to figure it out, you've got to navigate that. Texas defense looked amazing. Colin Simmons as advertised, Anthony Hill Jr. as advertised. I thought Ohio State's defense, shout out, Caleb Downs is Caleb Downs as advertised. Ohio State defense was much better than I expected. I thought they would take a step back, losing Sawyer and JT and a couple other defensive players. They picked up right where they left off last year in that national championship game. They looked good on defense. Even if Ohio State looks like they have a good enough defense that they can let Julian Sayin figure it out and they can get by and win some of these games. I didn't think Texas looked good enough defensively, or sorry, offensively, that makes me feel comfortable that they could get by with a bad offense. The offense looked too bad, in my opinion, and they just didn't seem to have a home run hitter that was threatening.
I think there's a couple different arguments here. I think Arch, yeah, he didn't have a great game. I also think Julian Sand, like I said, also didn't have a great game. I also think these are probably the top 2 defenses in the country. And you got to give Matt Patricia credit. He brings in the NFL Belichickian defensive structure where what what do we always say about Belichick when he was in the NFL? It doesn't matter how good or bad his defense is. Rookies always struggle against them because he makes everything so confusing. And this was Arch's first start. And I'm sure Texas was trying to do similar things to Julian Sayin, and they both succeeded at doing that. They both have superstars in college football on their defenses, and it played out that way. I was surprised, like you said, when I saw Jeremiah Smith dropping 2 balls in the first quarter. Like that's probably first game jitters. So I'm not gonna like bash him for that. But at the same time, I was like, what are we doing? You're not going to get more opportunities to score. You have to take advantage of everything. And didn't come out focused or something. Maybe first game jitters. Had 2 balls dropped. I think those numbers tell you a different story. I think Texas had over 120 more total offensive yards than Ohio State. Texas had more passing yards. Texas had more rushing yards. Texas had more penalties, though. And Ohio State had more time of possession, so they controlled the ball a little bit longer. It might be controversial of me to say, and it's kind of our dynamic. I'm not taking anything drastic away from this game. I think this was 2 of the best teams in the country playing. Ohio State was home. Arch, if he's not the best college football player to ever play, I'm not going to be heartbroken. Because I think like you're right. Name and the brand and everything, that hyped him up. That brought his hype to such a level that all of a sudden after his first half, there were so many memes about him online. And granted, you and I texted about it. It was like, it's unacceptable to have 37 pass yards going into the third quarter. But some of that is on Steve Sarkisian. We talked about in our preview show last week, Ohio State has 2 brand new coordinators. They brought in Matt Patricia to do a great job with the defense. And Brian Hartline, he's been with the program for like 8 years now, but this is his first time designing the offense and calling the offense. So they're at a disadvantage there. Obviously, they're home, so it's a little bit less. Steve Sarkisian is a play-calling offensive head coach. If Arch wasn't good or a bust, I find it so hard to believe that Sark, with his offensive expertise, wouldn't have gone out and gotten someone to compete with him in the offseason. 2, I find it just as inexcusable for Sark to his first play from scrimmage was like a rollout where the guy was open, but Arch was way short on it. You have to recognize that the guy's going to be nervous. You have to recognize the guy could be a little jittery, especially playing on the road in such a big game. And no matter how stoic or like mentally there he is, I think it's inexcusable that Steve Sark, as the offensive play caller, play designer, didn't have the ability to design an offense around Arch for week 1 against Ohio State. Maybe he did. Maybe Ohio State took it away. I'm not an X's and O's guy to know that. But it was – I'm not defending Arch. It was a bad overall game. I'm not defending Julian, saying he also didn't have a great game either. But both teams have really good defenses. I also think Sark holds some blame there, and maybe if we're looking back week 4, week 5, and Arch is still not looking great, yeah, this is on Arch. But maybe I'm the quarterback or team apologist on this week's episode. I don't know, but I feel like everyone who's hating on Arch is like, dude, was his first career start against probably the best or second best defense in the country on the road with so much hype around him. And his head coach didn't design a good game plan for him to succeed in week 1.
Yeah, I agree. I think the game plan, and you make a great point with the rollout, first play call for Arch. I don't think the game plan was put in place for Arch to succeed. Rolling your quarterback out, like you said, first play, making him throw on the run, not a great idea. I thought the offense was very uncreative and pretty stale in the first half. 37 passing yards. I thought Texas last year when they were rolling, a lot of motion, a lot of fake bubble screen here, flip it to their side of the field, motion wheel routes. They were creative, and I thought they looked really good when they did that. They didn't really do a whole lot of that. It was a lot of just like, okay, let's see what Arch can do. It almost felt like Sark was like trying to tee up Arch to have this 25 for 25 passing. Yeah, like every drive almost like felt like he was forcing Arch into trying to make Heisman play. Like, I don't know. Maybe Sark genuinely was like, oh, this kid is the greatest quarterback to ever grace Earth, and I'm going to show the world that. And he didn't have a backup plan of, hey, what if Arch comes out and is cold? What if Arch doesn't look great? What if he is struggling to read a defense? There just wasn't a backup plan there, which I think you need to. I feel like Ohio State put Julian Sayin in positions to make good plays. They didn't really ask him to do anything crazy. hey, get the ball to Carnell Tate, get the ball to Jeremiah Smith. They tried to run the ball. It didn't go very well for them, but I respect them for trying. They put him in positions to like grow and develop. But yeah, he didn't look great, but he didn't look terrible. I thought once Arch, I can guarantee you, Arch was feeling the pressure of, hey, I'm not playing well right now, and I'm sure he knows that. And that was when he started to get happy feet. That was when all of a sudden everything's back foot, everything's sidearm, everything's over the top, trying to force throws down the sideline when guys aren't open. Hospital ball to his tight end, uh, almost killed Jack Endries, who actually the one Texas offensive player I thought played a good game, probably Jack Endries, but almost got the guy murdered. Jack Endries can thanks Caleb Downs for not murdering him. Just I don't know. I think Arch just got probably in his head, got flustered as a young, quarterback in his first career start at the shoe is going to do. But I do think I was nervous about Arch, and I do think that some of his weaknesses or flaws that came out were difficult flaws. Like I've watched enough football to know when quarterbacks get happy feet and they struggle in that regard, that is a constant issue that any team that gets pressure, like that's a tough thing to overturn. Whereas Julian
Mm-hmm.
Sand, I thought like just a couple overthrows
He
early
looked
in the
comfy.
game. Had some, yeah, he looks comfy. He had some overthrows early, but he settled in. They just didn't really open it up, so you didn't really see much of him. But his weaknesses or his issues in that game felt more like young quarterback nervous. Whereas Arches were like, yeah, young quarterback nervous, but some of them like the happy feet, the trying to throw from every arm angle all the time, trying to not going through his progressions and just chucking a deep ball because he needed to make a play or thought he needed to make a play. Those things give me a little bit more pause. I think we're gonna in 5 weeks from now when Arch is balling out, everyone's gonna forget about this. But I do think it's worth noting. It looked like he had genuine flaws that Matt Patricia was exploiting and figured it out quick, and then kept those cover kind of the Vikings-esque blitzes where you have seven guys line of scrimmage, two are peeling back, someone who you don't even see is coming into blitz, doing a lot of stuff like that. So to Arch's credit, in Arch's defense, Matt Patricia did have he figured out Arch's flaws quickly and they exploited them well.
I think in general, like you make a great point. There's certain traits of a quarterback that you see and you're like, that guy's not going to be successful today or in his career or whatever it is. Um, I think Arch did display some of that. So that's the part that, like you said, makes me nervous as a college football fan or if I were a Texas fan about Arch. I think I just refuse to be a prisoner of the moment. And I know that's the second time I've said that. But just because he didn't do great in his first career start against the number 3 team in the country, I I don't think that's like an all indicative sign that he's going to be bad or he was a bust or his ranking was wrong. I also don't think his ranking was right, if that makes sense. I think it's somewhere in between. And if he's going to play like a really good football player, that's all Texas needs to win a national title. And I trust him to get comfortable enough in that spot in the pocket, get comfortable enough with Sark calling his plays, and we'll see how it goes. Maybe he won't, and maybe we'll be back here week 5 talking about, yeah, Arch was a bust, and we can tell you that then. I don't think we can say that right now.
I agree. I think it takes time, and I think my takeaway is Arch might not like how you were saying people have hyped him up to be the next greatest quarterback of our lifetime. I think maybe being the Heisman favorite coming in the season was a little too much. I think people hyping him up to be the next great college thing that we've ever seen, too much. I think he probably should have. I think the realistic. I also don't think he's a bust. I don't think he's a bum. I don't think he'll never be good. I think the realistic expectation was, hey, this guy's a pretty darn good quarterback who needs a lot of help to develop, like every other quarterback that's ever played football. I think he just needed a little more support, and I think people were just too quick to jump the gun on this is the Heisman, this is the best player in the country, this is the best quarterback I've ever seen. I think those are the people that need to come down to earth and say, hey, this is a good quarterback with a lot of good traits, but he does need to be developed. He does need some time. He does need game plan support. We can't
exactly.
just throw him out there at Ohio State and expect him to throw for 500 yards.
So I just want to point one quick thing out really quickly. Julian saying I have to completely agree with you. He looked comfortable. He didn't have a great game like I mentioned earlier, but he looked comfortable. He looked ready for the moment. And I think when he did drop back and throw the ball, it was like, oh yeah, that works. Like your mind immediately were like, yeah, that works. It's just this.
Yeah,
You played a
I like that.
playoff game week 1. So I think both of these guys are going to be much better next week and as time goes on. But we'll have to see. Maybe they won't. We've been wrong, and we've been wrong before. Speaking of us being wrong, Clemson, LSU. LSU beat Clemson 17-10. This is a reminder for everyone at home. It pains me to say this. We both picked Clemson to win the national title. Granted, they absolutely still can. This isn't 5
Yeah,
years ago where
yeah.
this loss keeps them out of the playoff. They absolutely still can. We also picked Cade Klubnik to win the Heisman. He absolutely still can, but I don't know. Cade Klubnik goes 19 of 38, 230 yards, no touchdowns, 1 interception. That was our worst pick of the week, where we had him going for 3+ touchdowns because he just decided not to give us any. And Garrett Nussmeier, 28, 38, 230 yards, 1 touchdown, no interception. It felt like a game for a little bit there that I didn't expect it to be such a defensive game. I was impressed by LSU. I was more than anything impressed by LSU. And obviously disappointed in Clemson and Cade Klubnik, not only because I picked them, but I think that game proves everyone, and I wrote it in our doc, that game proves everyone who said Clemson's returning their whole team from last year. They're not going to be any different than they were last year. They're going to beat up on the teams that they are better than, and they're going to lose to the teams that they are worse than. They're not going to be able to punch above their weight class. That's the part that I'm disappointed about seeing. And granted, it's week 1. Where were you with this game?
Yeah, I was disappointed in Clemson and also in the game as a whole. We knew the Texas Ohio State game was probably going to be like we called it. We said this is going to be an ugly game, low scoring, has high expectations, don't expect some crazy game. And that's what we got. And that was my expectation. This was my like circled game where I'm like, oh, dude, I want to sit down. I want to be ready to go because I think this thing is going to be 45-38. This was my like circled excitement game. So I was disappointed in the outcome of the game in the sense that it was sluggish. Neither team looked very good. Defensive battle I did not expect. I don't know if
No,
that's
not at
because the
all.
offenses played worse than they should have, or the defenses are a lot better than we expected. But I was obviously disappointed in. We both had Cade Klubnik, 3+ touchdowns. I expected them to come out and look amazing. They didn't. And I remember too, we had mentioned in our preview show, there's a world if Clemson's going to lose this game where they can't run the football, and that's going to be a problem. They could not run the football. It was genuinely pretty embarrassing. They only and
32
I
rush
think a big
yards.
mistake. Yeah, that's horrible. 1.6 yards per carry. Something that I really didn't like. I feel like once the run game wasn't working, they just went away from it entirely. I get it. Like your bread and butter is going to be Klubnik in your wide receiver room. But once they stopped trying to run the ball, it just felt like everything was an incompletion. It felt like LSU was just completely committed to downfield, completely committed to covering up Wesco, Moore, Williams, those three. And it just Clemson didn't have an answer. They just kept trying to force it to those three. LSU did a really good job adjusting and bracketing. Like Wesco, anytime he tried to go downfield, bracket. Anytime Antonio Williams was trying to cross over the middle, bracket. It was just, I thought LSU had a really good game plan, and Clemson just really failed to adjust. They stopped running the ball, and that just, I thought, ruined the game for them entirely. Evidence is 19 of 38 for Cade Klubnik, which is not what we're used to seeing from him.
No, I mean, I have the stats in front of me. LSU had the ball 15 more minutes of game clock than
Terrible.
Clemson did. And it's not, I don't say that just to talk about like game, like having game control. I'd say that to like prove you right. Clemson got gave up on the run. Clemson chose not
Hmm.
to run the ball after, I don't know, early part of the game. 32 rush yards. And what that leads them to do is, like you said, just allows LSU to focus more on the pass game and try to bottle up the receivers, bottle up tight ends, and really get after Cade Klubnik with the pass rush because you don't have to worry as much about the run game. And what that leads to is a lot of 3 and outs. It leads to an offense that can't get into rhythm because they don't have the ball very often. And Garrett Nussmeier looked solid. I think Garrett Nussmeier looked pretty good. And not the best, but we expected Clemson to have a good defense. If Clemson or if LSU was playing Louisiana Monroe, yeah, if they scored 17, we'd have a problem. Clemson's the number 3 team in the country for a reason. And I'm more than anything just disappointed in Clemson's offensive plan. But I think outside of that, I have to talk about how impressed I am with LSU defensively, because this is the same defense 2 years ago, and we keep talking about it, that wasted Jaden Daniels' Heisman campaign. And they took some steps last year. They took more steps this year to fix that defense, and the defense showed up. And they showed out. Obviously, Clemson made it easier on them giving up on the run, but LSU's defense showed out. Does this game change how you view either of these teams' futures? Or do you think, because neither of us picked LSU to even be in the SEC title game. We thought they were going to be an SEC contender, but we thought maybe 3rd, 4th, maybe 5th in the conference, not in the top 2. I think they're probably Clemson, a playoff contender here.
I agree. I was going to say, I think Clemson stays the same for me. I'm going to give them one more week to prove my old take on them right. LSU, I do feel a lot more strongly about them than I did coming into the season. And both of our fears, we had talked about this a lot, was their defense. We didn't really trust what their defense was going to be this year. And that was their strong suit yesterday. And then a player who's been criminally under talked about, we only very briefly mentioned him in our preview show, but Caden Durham looked really good. True sophomore running back for LSU. He had a quiet, good year, like 1,000 total yard year last year, but kind of under the radar. He looked good yesterday. He was one of the few players I thought that was like consistently making good plays. He ran the ball well. He caught 3 passes for 22 yards. He looks like a good football player. I thought LSU, they didn't run the ball like incredibly well, but they stuck with it. They fought hard. I thought they had a good short passing game to kind of complement the run game when it wasn't working well for them. And Garrett Nussmeier is Garrett Nussmeier. Like, we know he can sling it. We know it's going to come. So LSU, yeah, my fears for them were, is Caden Durham really good? He was a true freshman. Is he good enough to be a bell cow back? And then it was, secondly, is the defense going to hold up for them this year? The answers to those questions look like yes, and those are my hesitations. So I'm higher on them now than I was 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I think.
Do you change? Does your opinion change on either?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't change on Clemson. It does worry me about them as national title contenders because of the run game that we mentioned, but also because, like I said already, the biggest concern with them as a true national title contender was that they were just going to be a carbon copy of last year, and they weren't going to be able to stack up against teams that were better than them, and they were only going to beat up against teams that were worse than them. So that is my concern with Clemson. I still think they have an insane talent roster that should overcome most of these problems, but LSU went into Clemson and claimed the real Death Valley for a reason. And I say that facetiously, obviously, like that joke, like that line. But at the same time, LSU went into their home, kept them to 32 rush yards, and like I won the game without like you even trying to punch back with the run game. You didn't give K. Klubnik a chance, and K. Klubnik didn't have a great game, but you didn't give K. Klubnik a chance. Quarterback's man's best friend is a dog. Quarterback's best friend is a run game, and you didn't give him a chance to succeed. LSU, I think, just like you, I am higher on them now. That just means I don't know. I'm still not flip flopping LSU and Alabama in my mind because we're through week 1. Now let's see how week 2, week 3, week 4 goes. I'm still not a believer in Brian Kelly. And ironically, after this past week, I'm still more of a believer in Kalen DeBoer to fix things at Alabama than I am in Brian Kelly to finally get things right for 15 games. That's how I feel about this game. I think it was disappointing on Clemson's side and really impressive on LSU's side in general.
Completely
Obviously,
agree.
with when you have a winner and loser, that's what it is.
Mhm.
Before we get into our picks, we're trying to get you to dinner. I had a couple more observations. Any observations you bring up,
I like that.
we don't need to talk too much about them. But Bryce Underwood made his debut. I think he was the first true freshman at Michigan to start at quarterback since 2009. Justice Haynes came in. He had
Look
16
good.
carries for 159 yards and 3 touchdowns against New Mexico. Michigan looks like they're improving, and if Bryce Underwood's better or continues to grow, then they could be a problem in the Big Ten, in my opinion. My only problem is I don't trust any true freshman quarterback other than Trevor Lawrence to lead anything
hmm
other than like an 8-9 win team.
Yeah, I think I didn't really get to see any of the Michigan game, but I had seen stuff on Twitter. Bryce, 21 to 31, 251 in the air and a touchdown. That's pretty solid. I mean, based on what we've seen from a lot of the other young quarterbacks around the country, that's one of the better debuts, even not only just freshmen, but season debuts we saw this year. So got to give him props for that. Justice Haynes, yeah, that stat line's unbelievable, and his highlights were really good on Twitter too. On College Game Day, Nick Saban like had kind of shouted out Justice Haynes when they did a little segment of "Where Are They Now?" and was like, "Yeah, that kid is going to be a stud wherever he goes." Beyond Michigan in the NFL, and I mean, it's Nick Saban. He knows football. He was right.
Yeah.
He looked amazing. My one fear, Michigan for them playmakers. Do they have them? Who are they outside of Bryce and Haynes? Who's that going to be? It was New Mexico. I'm sure as the season goes on, they'll have a receiver, a tight end step up. They recruit well. So I thought that was good. Someone I wanted to shout out, we talked about it very briefly right before the show. BYU, 50 carries, 500 rushing yards with 13 or 14 different running backs taking carries. Just unbelievable. And not even running backs, players. I think it was like, oh, you're a linebacker, you played running back in high school. Yeah, come get a carry. 500
Yeah.
rushing yards is unbelievable. If you want to fire up any football coach, that's how you do it. 500 rushing yards. It is really hard to lose football games when you're running the football like that. So Jake
Yeah.
Retzlaff, speaking of BYU, looks good for Tulane, but holy cow, BYU's run game. That was incredibly impressive.
My other observation, it was Kansas State jet lagged from going to Ireland, or are they overhyped? Because they just beat South Dakota, North Dakota, one of those Dakotas, 38-35. I mean, this is a Big 12 contender, and they had to come back in the final minute. I
Yeah,
got a
that's
text that it was
crazy.
35-31. They were down, and I was like, oh my god, they're about to start the season 0-2.
Yeah, that was a bad hangover. On the flip side, Iowa State, they got South Dakota, kind of funny enough, and they looks good, 55-7. Rocco Beck, 19 of 20 for 278 and 3 touchdowns, 14 yards a completion. Uh, yeah, I thought Rocco Beck, some of the fears we talked about, not fears, but the troubles he had in Ireland. Obviously, like we've said many times, the weather, the situation is very different. Uh, I, I thought he completely came back to earth and was the Rocco Beck that we saw last year, and the Rocco Beck that Iowa State believers said, "Hey, this guy's going to take this next step." That was the Rocco Beck that they got yesterday. Uh, Big ups to him. I think people kind of forgot about him this offseason. People didn't talk about him a lot coming into the year. Iowa State's 2-0. They're first place in the Big 12, and Rocco Beck looks like he's rolling. So Iowa
Right.
State's a team I think is being under talked about right.
I'm excited to see how that season plays out, how the rest of their season plays out, because they're the totem pole in the Big 12 right now. And we talked about last week, they're 1-0 already in the conference. Everyone's going to be chasing them until they slip up. A couple more guys to highlight. Devin Dampier transfer into Utah from New Mexico. Looked damn good yesterday. Looked as advertised. On the ground, through the air, had a touchdown on both sides. Looked really damn good, and it's fun seeing Utah's offense with a healthy quarterback again. And then on the flip
Finally.
side, Nico, who's playing for the UCLA team that Devin played, Nico Imaliava did not play very well. It almost felt like a good talent, like he's good, but there's nothing around him. There's no run game.
Yeah, he was
There's
sacked
no
four
offensive
times.
line.
That's
Yeah, there's no like he's sitting back waiting for a receiver to come open to get sacked, or if he's just hoping for any protection. He didn't have it. I don't think that game was all on Nico, and there's a lot of UCLA fans who are hitting on Nico, but I think they're just growing for a specific reason. I mean, right now, and then John Mateer, Alabama, not Alabama. Oh my God, Oklahoma. He looks as advertised, man. What, 392 pass yards?
He was the best QB1 this weekend, right? Like he was of the big profile names.
Yeah,
I think he had the most impressive debut showing of all the new faces.
yeah. I think he had 3 touchdowns, 1 pick. Oklahoma. Granted, for everyone at home, we understand these teams aren't playing high level opponents. We understand Oregon played Montana State. We understand Oklahoma beat Illinois State. But it's more, does this work? And what we were looking for with Mateer and the new OC that went with him from Washington State was, is this a system that's going to work? Is he comfortable there? Or were we just watching it through Washington State colored glasses? And he looked damn good. Recap of our picks. Jace, you want to walk us through the recap, and then we can call it from there?
Yeah, it was a rough one for me. Farbode, you did all right. You had Ohio State correct. You picked them outright and cover. Both those things happened. You were on Auburn. That was a Friday night game. Close ending. That was one of our few really close games that kind of happened.
Yeah.
You were on the right end there. I was wrong in both of those. I had Baylor and Texas 0 for 2 in those two. And then tough week for me, 0 for 4. You went 2 for 2. We were both incorrect in Alabama at Florida State. I don't think we were alone in being incorrect by picking Alabama.
No.
You are lying to me if you said you picked Florida State in that game. And
Unless
then
you're Lee Corso.
Clemson, yes, unless you're Lee Corso, and shout out him. He's the ultimate ball knower. He's watched more football than we could ever hope to. And then LSU at Clemson, I think we were also, other than SEC heads, most media members are also on Clemson. We were incorrect there, unfortunately. And then our fifth game to be determined, going to kick off in not too long from now. We got Notre Dame -2.5 at Miami, 7:30 Eastern on ABC. I guess don't even need to say that because that's more for Farbo and I. You're listening to this, you already know the outcome. Farbo and I are both on Miami for that game. And then underdog picks, I'm going to do all of them here. Underdog picks, I had Toledo. I got 1 point. They did cover at Kentucky. They did not win outright, so I just got my one. Farbode, you had Syracuse. They almost backdoor covered for you, but the Joey Aguilar, dude, he looked great. We haven't even talked about him. People counted him out.
Yeah.
He looks really good. Tennessee looks solid. Unfortunately for you, that means Syracuse did not get the cover. Although they did put up a fight, which I thought that was a respectable fight by them. Parlay to finish our recap of our picks. The four-legger, the flag four discussion four-legger. Farbode, we both were correct on the under 47.5 Texas Ohio State. That was my my text to Logan Shanks. Shout out Logan. My lock of the week was the under in that game, and that was very comfortable. I don't think we sweat that one for a second.
No.
And then we also hit the Utah UCLA over. As you made a good point, Pac-12 after dark, man. We know what those games look like. Yeah, Utah held up their end of that bargain, putting up 43. UCLA did not. And then the two picks we were incorrect on, kind of a random one, but Oregon State -1.5. I was a believer in Malik Murphy. I think you probably were too. We didn't even shout out JKS. I'm not going to even attempt to say that full name on the air right now because it'd be disrespectful for however I would say it. He looks good, though. He had a good arm. I thought Cal looked way better than we both expected them to. We were incorrect there. And then we were incorrect on Cade Klubnik, 3+ passing touchdowns. We have unfortunately already hashed that one out. Very disappointing by Cade.
Look, we're both praying that Miami covers or wins tonight because that would make me 3 for 5 for the week and you 1 for 5. But
I need it.
Yeah, you need it. But look, that's why they make week 2. That's why we're going to be back here on Thursday's show and picking another 5 games and picking more flagged for parlay and picking more underdogs. And we'll have plenty to go through there. It was a really fun week 1 for everyone at home, and I hope everyone got to tune into as many games as you could. We said it last week. It was good to have college football back. It was good to have the four screen back, having all the games on different monitors back. It was good to have chaos back. And I think watching the Alabama-Florida State game and the Clemson-LSU game in particular are going to remind us about college football picks and how it's not on paper anymore. It's crazy things happen when you trust 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds to execute in front of 50,000, 60,000 people.
That's why casinos aren't broke. So
Yes, exactly. Alrighty, that's been episode 22. My name's Farbud Merkazi. He's Jace Haftu. If you like what you heard, we're going to be doing this twice a week, all season long. Check us out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, at Flag for Discussion. We're on YouTube at Flag for Discussion, and on Twitter at F4Discussion, and on TikTok at Flag, the number 4 Discussion. We're a lot of places. Follow, subscribe, like, turn on the bell. Whatever other hosts tell you to do that for us too. We got to get Jace to dinner. From Farbud Merkazi, myself, and Jace Hatfield. Thanks for tuning in. It's been a fun week 1. See you for week 2.